Hey rail fans, welcome back to the Payne Suphren Railroad. Today, as I said in our last video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I actually built this railroad and the prep work that I did before any track was laid. So the first thing that happened was I had, as I explained, I had the quarter-inch piece of plywood that I put on top of the frame, 1x3 frame, and then on top of that I put a 1/2-inch piece of insulation board. And so the other thing is that it's 39 inches the tall from the floor, the top of the frame, before the 1/4-inch plywood and the 1/2-inch piece of foam board. So with the foam board and up to the railhead is a little over 40 inches, which is what a lot of model railroaders do. It's about the right height, especially for a train platform. Now, if it's like an around the shelf layout, around the walls layout rather, and you're going to only have like 24 inches or so width, people tend to put it closer to eye level, maybe 50 inches. But I found, before I knew any of this actually, that if I sat under the train table and I'm wiring things up, it was a comfortable height for me to sit under the train table and be working at 39 inches to do all the wiring. So I did that for comfort, not knowing exactly that the other stuff. But anyway, when I'm sitting, which I do when I operate the train table, I sit in my office chair, and it's pretty much at eye level. It's a little bit above eye level, so I'm looking down just slightly at a slight angle on everything. But when the train disappears behind buildings and goes behind the hill, it disappears for me. So it's for my psychological state that I put that together like that. Anyway, the first thing after putting up the foam insulation board, first thing I did was paint it a mud color. And I also painted the sides of the table, of the frame, that same color. It's kind of a green, kind of a greenish color, and it has some green in it, I think. But anyhow, it looked good, like mud to me, earth color, dry earth. And so that an entire board got covered with that, and then I let that dry for 24 hours, acrylic paint. And then after that, I drew a 1-foot square grid across the table using a Sharpie. And that enabled me to place things where I wanted to. Now, this is the paperwork that I did. Everything was drawn out on paper before I did anything. So I had an idea of where the buildings were going to go and how I was going to do the scenery. And for the most part, it worked out really well. I was really pleased that I was that accurate with it on paper. A lot of times you draw stuff on paper and it just doesn't come out right. But I had a grid that I worked out, and you can see it more accurately on this. This is a more accurate rendition of what the railroad ended up looking like, the actual rails, when I laid the track. And so you can see that 1-by-1-foot grid. And I could tell, the only thing I did was when I placed the canning factory, I wanted that, I built that canning factory first before putting anything else on the table, because I needed that angle of the industrial track to go next to it. And that's because that gets into the illusion and art of model railroading. You don't want anything paralleling the edge of the table, because that emphasizes that you have an oval of track going around a rectangular table, and that becomes a toy train. So to not have that, and psychologically have everything at an angle of some sort. So you'll notice all the buildings, there is only one building that is facing parallel to the front edge of the table, and that's the control tower, which is above that first passenger car there and above the GP engine. Everything else is at an angle. So that angle was set by the industrial track. We're at the canning factory. So everything goes by that angle. And it's not at that angle, it's going, you can see how the roads go and actually make cuts the train table into quarters. So you can kind of see that on this diagram, where the one road pretty much cuts the table in half going, but I made sure it curved so it's not just straight lines again. And then Main Street goes up and over the bridge in the back, and I have another road coming off of that, so that creates a little quadrangle or triangle up in that corner. But that gave me sections to do different things with the rail. So I have the hill in the back and the church with the graveyard. And then and the other grouping is the farm area and the farmer's market, with the barn in the back, the farm scene, and then the farmer's market scene, and the schoolyard going in with that scene also, and the apple orchard. And then I also took the track. Now the interchange track, you'll notice, it goes off at a slight angle. It's not exactly, the end of it is, but it curves so that it's not exactly the same curve as the main line or as the station passing siding is. So that's another art of illusion of model road or railroading, that the tracks separate themselves by their curvature. And even where the passing siding for the station comes in on this side, it's a lesser radius than the main line is. The main line's at least 22 inches. I'm not sure exactly what it came out to, but that's at least 22 inches going around this curve on the main line. This is probably closer to 19 coming around there. Now the switch, all the switches on the main line are number 6 switches, and they are 22-inch radius coming off of the curved side of the switch. So that gave me that 22-inch radius, which I wanted to do for the main line because of the length of the passenger cars. The coaches are 72 scale feet long, this one and this one. This is slightly shorter. It's about 70, I believe, the mail car. So they look good on broad curves. If you have sharp curves and they're going around a sharp curve, they look toy-like. So that's another thing you have to pay attention to if you're on a model railroad, is it doesn't look toy-like. You need as broad a curve as you can. So my minimum, and you have to set minimum curve standards when you're figuring it out on paper. So I figured I'm going to have at least 22-inch radius curves on the main line in the front where you can see it. In the back, that one in the back, I believe, going in front of the barn is about a 20-inch radius curve. And where it disappears under the bridge is actually an 18-inch, and that was because of the placement of the switch for the lead track to the yard, because it was up closer to the curve, so I had to make a sharper curve up there. But you don't notice it and don't really see it because of the scenery I placed there. And it goes, it's, you can't see how sharp that curve is. Now, the first thing I did after I got the grid work put down is place all the switches where I wanted them, approximately where they were going to be. Once they were in place, I had them just tacked down to the bare table with no road bed yet. Then I outlined the switches with a Sharpie. And then I connected each switch with a kind of a freehand curve. I did have some laths lying around, a couple pieces of lathing, and I drilled holes in them, one for a 22-inch curve radius and one for a 20-inch curve radius, and that's what I used to do the circumference of the main line, so I could get these curves pretty much what I wanted. That's how I know about what these are. These are, like I said, this is about a 20-inch curve. These are 22-inch for sure, coming around the edges here. And in back, it goes down to about a 20-inch. But I had those actually nailed. I used a nail to put through those holes that I drilled in the lathing, and put that at a center point, and use that as so I could draw a curve on the other side, and I drilled a hole. So the holes were 22 inches apart, and and another one was 20-inch between the two holes. So that's how I drew all the track down. I had the center line of the track between the switches. I had the outlines around the switches, so I knew what the actual switches were like, and that enabled me, because I knew approximately where on the grid and everything I was going to place those switches. Once I had that done, I laid the track down and just pinned it to using little nails, track pins, for the main line, and then I ran a train around it to make sure that it would run okay. Then I picked it all up again and took cork road bed and cut it and placed it down around, and because I had the track all drawn at where the track was going to be, so that went down next, got all glued down, and once that was dried, then I laid the track, and the track got painted. These edges of inside and out of the track rails I painted a rust color, and the ties were painted kind of grayish, a wash of gray, so they look weathered. They've been out in the weather a while, and different shades of gray I was used. Once all that was down, I wired it again. I rewired the track. I have several spots where I poked the wire up next to the rail and soldered it to the rail. And then ballasted the middle of the track in between the rails. And then after that, I started doing scenery. So that was everything I did. That was all the prep work before I even ran a train. As I said, the track was just down temporarily when I started doing running trains, but we'll run and see if this train will run a little bit for you. Okay, so as I said, hardly anything is parallel to the edge of the table. So hardly anything is parallel to the edge of the table. So the only straight piece is only like 1 foot, a straight piece along this edge of this table. And the rest of it's curved, or at an angle of some sort. And that is so that it gives that illusion of not being on a rectangular table. Now let's pull it into the station. It's gone from Prairie to Payne. It's back at Payne now. And I'll pull it into the station. And it stopped. And it stopped at the station now, back at Payne, where it originated from. That's the, like I said, that was a morning train that went up to Free, and now it's returned back in late afternoon. And so that will give you some idea of everything I did in prep work and planning this whole thing. And now, next time we'll go start in the back, and I'll talk about how I made the hill in the back, the wooded hill. And the second thing that went onto the railroad, the second building, was that church in the back and the graveyard. And I'll talk about the buildings in each scene. And so that does it for this time, friends. This is Grandpa Bob leaving on track 3.